Hello and welcome to Comic Books and You. Today we're going to be looking at Les Etranges, The Stranges by Alex A. at Presse Aventure in Quebec. It's a fairly recent book. It has some limited release, I guess, something like that. I've seen it just about everywhere, but the numbers sold must be pretty good because I don't see it in many places anymore, or they just didn't release that many. And knowing Alex A. in Presse Aventure, it would probably be the former in this case. The numbers on these books are generally really good. This is one of the smaller books at a more advantageous price point, around $15 Canadian. So many parents would be able to get this book for their kids, and but libraries would jump on it like most Alex A. books. As with any good Alex A. book, we are introduced to a bunch of quirky characters. One of the fun things in this one is that there's not really a real antagonist. There is kind of one, but it's mainly just a character piece about those 5 little characters we have here who are antiviruses living in the Quebec supercomputer that get thrown out into the real world. Right now we've got those 5 antiviruses, and they get thrown into the real world and inhabit various animals. Their leader is Tex, who gets thrown into a beaver. He really wants to return into the computer, and it gets a little bit neurotic because of it, and starts obsessing about building dams and stuff since he is in a beaver. The brain of the operation is Quad, who gets thrown into a frog. He is really objective focused and really wants to get things done, even though he is kind of ambivalent between living in the real world and going back to the computer. Just because he has an objective is why he's really working towards getting their team back into the computer. Octet is the youngest of the team, and he possesses a deer. We know Alexa, and he really likes his deers. I mean, his main character from his main series, Agent Jean, is a deer. And he's the one that enjoys reality the most and living in our world the most. I really like the crest for the antlers. It really looks really cool, in my opinion, and gives a lot of personality to this character. We've got Rao, who is the tough one with a heart of gold. He's the big tough guy who gets into a bear. Once he starts befriending other animals, he kind of enjoys life in our reality. The last one is Wiki, who's an hyperactive antivirus who takes over the body of a rabbit and really likes multiplying himself. And that's is pretty much his entire arc. You will notice throughout this story that there isn't much character development. I mean, it's a 60-page small comic, so there's a lot of characters in not that many page real estate to live in. We'll talk about that more later. This story begins with our characters in the Quebec supercomputer, where they are alerted to the presence of a virus called Node. This is basically the antagonist of the story, but that's about the only bit where you're really going to see that creature. They go into battle and attempt to stop the virus. They all have their own tasks. One of them, Quad, is there to try to lower the temperature. Octet tries to keep the electrical connections together. Wiki and Rao are fighting Node himself, and things really get out of control. They're just not able to keep the system together, and the whole thing collapses. As it collapses, they get thrown out of the computer, and they find refuge in the body of various woodland critter. Our beaver ear, frog, rabbit, bear, and the deer. Of course, they're going to be identified by their colors. That's going to make our lives really easy as a reader. And I think that's very important when we think of the true public of this particular book, which is younger readers. After they wake up, Tex asks for explanation from Quad, who starts explaining concepts like solid matter and reality versus energy, etc. So this is a bit of humor, a bit of a comedy that's going to go throughout the entire book here, with them not quite understanding what reality and actual matter is. Tex quickly asks how they would get back home, and Rao says that they're currently in the digital limbo and they're never going to go back to their home. But Tex decides to lead the way before getting a little bit of a taste of reality with a bee stinging him, a bird introducing himself, and falling into a puddle of mud. The only one who seems excited is Octet here. They start having some issues, including feeling hungry for the first time in their lives, and Octet teaches them how to eat using the hole in the middle of your face to make matter enters into you. He shows that you can eat berries, and he says that the nicer something looks, the better it is for energy. So he eats some very distinctive mushrooms and has a bit of a reaction to them. Again, a lot of little humor. Tex makes the tree fall because he's a beaver, and he starts getting a feeling and a desire to build a dam. Rao actually steps on a computer component and throws it away in rage, hitting Quad's nose, where he says in response, well, this part of my body is quite spongy, so I'm not too hurt by it. Rao leaves the team behind, but the rest of them start looking around for other computer components, and they find a deleted humans along with a digital interface. Looks like a tablet, which they start thinking of using to try to figure out how to get back to their home. Rao, on the other end, starts connecting with nature. He makes a nest fall off a tree, but he catches it and protects the birds that are keeping the eggs there. So he goes from being really in a bad mood to being in a good mood, and then being a little bit grumpy. Just gives us that character development for him. A few hours later, our heroes are in the middle of a thunderstorm where they learn about the soft of life, la molle de vie, which is basically water, and they find it very important. Rao starts protecting some of the other woodland creatures while this is going on, and Octet starts running in the rain because he likes it a lot. We learned that Wiki keeps duplicating himself, and that he really enjoys doing that, and Octet gets hit by a lightning bolt, but after being hit, Quad connects the user interface to him and gives it just a little bit more power so they can start trying to figure out what their computer is versus real life. Seasons go by as Quad investigates the computer and the surroundings, and our characters start messing up the environment where they live. Octet is really not pleased with how all the others keep destroying the environment. I mean, Tex keeps cutting down trees and building a dam, while Wiki keeps reproducing and eating all the food. But Quad finally announces that he understands where they came from, and there was that great design of what a human should look like and what a computer looks like. There's a joke on how computer is written as well. There's no real English translation for it, so I can't really do it here. Quad gives the explanation of where they're from and where they can go back, and he tasks the team to find a few different things to fix the computer. But Octet just tells them that they shouldn't be doing that, and that they should realize that they now live in our world and stop acting like viruses. While Octet goes away, Quad fixes the computer with honey, some crystals, earthworms. I'm not quite sure it would have worked anyways, and he's waiting for a lightning bolt to power it up. Unfortunately, when the lightning bolt actually hits it, it kind of melts the whole thing and starts a forest fire. Rao takes charge of the situation because he wants to rescue all the other animals that are now in trouble, and he starts helping them and tells Tex to break down his dam in order to flood the entire area and try to stop the fire. You hear Tex breaking down his dam. It's actually a fun little panel. At the other end of the forest, Octet meets a group of very friendly wolves who just want to help him out. We can see here the helping out in question. And Rao saves them real quick with a little fight scene. Everybody finally agrees that they should be learning how to live in our world and not try to destroy it. After a very short interlude and the help of a little bird helping Rao, they find a strange locale where everything seems to be there for them to survive, including a giant golden pyramid, which is another staple of Alex books if you start looking into them. It's a very simple story. It's extremely straightforward. As I keep saying, there's not much character development, but it works for what it's supposed to be, which is a fairly decent kids book. Another advantage of it is once you learn that the creator did it in a single week. 60 pages, even though they're about manga size, so for English bande dessinee, for English comics and American comics, it would be about 40 pages. Still quite a bit to do in a single week. The line art, the inking, the scripting, and the coloring. Everything was done by the author. Of course, he says afterwards, the intro, which is about 10 pages where they're in the computer, that was done afterwards. but that's 60 pages. It's 70 pages in total for the book. Of course, there was also all the addition and the corrections that are required. That's to be understood. But this book here basically puts an end to any pretense people have that making a comic book for quality is going to take an eternity, because this is actually a pretty decent quality comic book in the end. The cover for this is fairly basic, but it is quite effective at attracting the eye of the reader. Very bright colors, very interesting font for the title, a mix of technology and nature. It's got everything that we really would want to attract readers. That's what the real goal of a cover would be. You do get a little bit of gruesome on it as well with the dead fish, which is part of what we see also in this book, and it establishes our 5 main characters. Honestly, it's hard to think of a better cover in this particular case. Groupe Modus, which is the owner of Presse Aventure, generally has different format for these releases, but in this case there was only this smaller size comic available in a hardcover. Generally, most Alexa books come out originally as a soft cover, and there's also an hardcover like collector's edition that's like about $10 more. Maybe the second print for this will be soft cover, or maybe they'll do a side book for it as a soft cover. I'm not quite sure, but even there, the price point on this one, like I was saying, is about $15. So if it went with a soft cover, it would probably be something like $10. Pages themselves are glossy, very fancy, actually fancier than what I would expect in a $15 book. And it's quite impressive what Presse Aventure keeps doing with these books overall. The actual first bit of this book is the quick 2-page introduction, where the author actually explains the process he went through in order to make this book, and how excited he was actually in making this book in a single week. We learned that he basically drew it and worked on it at the top of a barn, had quite a bit of trouble doing it, but managed to do it. So it is quite interesting to see that process and just how well it came out in a single week. I'm not going to say it's a perfect book. I'm not going to say it has top of the line art, but it does exactly what it's meant to do at a price point where it's meant to be, and produced and released in a very, very effective time frame. As far as the art goes, of course, this is as cartoony as it gets, and it's a great display of Alex's style and talents. One thing we need to know is that he actually did the line art, the inking, and the coloring on this. He didn't use anybody else either. So this is really a full display of his cartooning talents in a way. We meet various creatures, not only our heroes, and they're all fun and diverse in their own way, and it improves the work. If we only saw our main characters, probably wouldn't be as fun. We saw as well different version of the same animals. We got a bear with Rao and a bear ear. We've got a bunny and Wiki. So we see that there's difference between our main characters and the animals they meet. But one thing we do see is that it's a lot of rote learning by the creator now. All of those characters here are things that you would have seen in other Alexa's book over the years, which is not super surprising in the way this particular book was made. The scenes in the supercomputer are pretty cool and imaginative, and what my son kind of told me that there's kind of a link between this and other Alexa's book. It is pretty much all set in the same universe in some way. I'm not 100% sure where this would go in the whole time frame of the Alexa universe. It might not even be something we need to worry about in the end. The nature scenes are pretty straightforward and simple, but we do get some details in the grass. We get a lot of trees that actually have some work done on them. There's always something in the background or something to try to put in the background. There's very few shortcuts being used like we see in a lot of other comics. Some of them are fairly simple here. That apple tree, fairly straightforward. I mean, it's a tree with apples and a gradient background. Not meant to be super complex, but it works in what we have here fairly well, in my opinion. The fight scene with the wolf is pretty funny. It's, like I said, they kind of look a little bit weird and more human than wolf. It just goes with the art style that Alexa keeps using, and it's fairly short, about 3 pages. But I don't think we needed anything more than that. The wolves are just there as a reminder that nature is not always the kindest thing. The pages on this are, like I said, a little bit smaller than usual. I would say about a third smaller than a regular American comic page, which would mean about the same size as a manga page in terms of real estate. In terms of how it's set up, the pages are a little bit different than a manga page, but the page real estate on them is well used. The paneling is easy to follow, which is very important in that kind of book. And there's variety in the paneling as well. It's not the standard 9 boxes or something along those lines. It plays around with the real estate as it can. As far as the story goes, this is a basic fish out of the water story with not that many story beats that are outside of the ordinary. We really follow a structure that we're used to and that we can easily refer ourselves to. It's not as complex as some isekai sometimes get to be, which is in the same category, but still, it's in this general category here. I do feel that we have way too many characters in this. I would probably have shrunk the team from 5 to 3 and really keep it very straightforward here. The one who wants to go home, which would be a mix of Tex and Quad. The one who wants to stay, which would have been Octet. And the one who learns a lesson about staying, which would have been Rao. Wiki is pretty much useless in this entire story. He adds some humor and some gags that actually work fairly well, but it doesn't move the story in any way. Quad and Tex are pretty much interchangeable as far as characters go and would have been melded pretty well. I don't think it was necessary to have that many characters here. We've had a discussion on this when we looked at Apollyon as well. Sometimes having too many characters too quickly is a detriment to your story. As I keep saying as well, none of the characters have massive depth. We get what we need from them, and anybody that's a bit more serious or wants something with more depth will probably not enjoy this as much as someone who just wants something simple to read, or, kids, which is the target audience of this book. It is rather entertaining to keep seeing our characters trying to figure out what reality is. Another nice thing is that they're not hyper competent like we see in some stories. I mean, in a Disney version of this, one of the characters would be a girl boss, and she would be the best at everything, and she would be the one teaching all the others what needs to be done. And it's also nice that they're also not totally incompetent like we sometimes have in some fish out of the water stories, especially in that kids range there with cartoony characters. They're in that nice bracket there where you see that they're learning, you see that they're growing, even though there's not that much to do with it. It's really nice to see that the antiviruses start behaving like viruses in the real world and that they collapse the ecosystem and realizing that they need to do better. Honestly, once again, nothing that is out of the ordinary or out of sort, and easy for anybody who gets this book to understand. Really, if you look at this whole thing in the whole package here, you could literally have had books of materials in this. It's actually a little bit better, in my opinion, that it's in a tight package rather than stretching it out over 3, 4, 5 volumes, which would be great for the bank account, but wouldn't be great for the readers, especially if there's a long delay between them. We get a lot of intentional misspelling and wordplay in there, nothing that is eye level that would require you to get a dictionary out. They're jokes kids can easily understand and easily gravitate towards, or people who are learning to read French. We do get the environmentalist message throughout of this, but it's not one that beats you over the head with it. It's just one that is very straightforward and one that is easy to get into, which is don't destroy where you live, which I think even if you're an ardent anti-global warming or pro-global warming, or I don't know what you would be calling yourself, you can easily get behind. While this was set up to be really a one-shot, the setup is good enough that you can easily get a sequel, and people would probably gravitate towards it. There's even a hook at the end if you read through the lines to figure out that something else is going on. So you do have those hooks, but it's not going to be a requirement, and it's not going to be something that I'm going to hunt for or live to expect. If this is all we get from Les Etranges, I'm fine. If we get a book 2 in the future, 2-3 years down the line, it'll be fine as well. It's not as bad as, let's say, having to wait for the second volume of a regular American comic book series. It's a book that also shows us spending months and years trying to come up with the most refined graphic novel isn't really a requirement. Sometimes all you need is a fun idea and the motivation to do it. I can't really get sales numbers from this. I'm keep trying to get details from Groupe Modus, but I don't have a journalist pass, I guess. But I would expect that the numbers are actually fairly significant. Local bookstores were pushing it and needed restocks, actually, because there's very few of them still on the shelves. One place I didn't see this book was my local newsstand, which normally has a lot of those recent French bande dessinée. So who knows? Maybe it's in between the two, or maybe it was more of a limited release. I can't really tell. It's a really good book if you're trying to learn French. There's nothing very complicated, and all the jokes are easy to grasp. It's good for kids, and even good for people who are just looking for something different just to pass the time. Not stupidly expensive. It's good quality, so it's going to keep. So it's an easy recommend for me. So I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day. I thank you very much for listening to me for so long. Keep on reading comics. Keep on enjoying them. I'll keep reviewing and analyzing them. And I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.